So welcome again for some of you who have just joined us for the Art of Breathing, part 2. Again, joined by Sylvie Grote, our esteemed guest. And what we're going to start with after you've assumed that comfortable seat is a little activity of bringing a little bit of attention to the breath. So without any major instruction, if you'd like to come into a comfortable seated position, that could be in a chair, that could be seated on a ground on a blanket like I am, whatever's going to be most comfortable and appropriate. There's no lesser option of a seat when we are doing some type of breathing or pranayama exercise. You just want to make sure that you're comfortable and there's not too much tension in the posture, okay? Spine is nice and long, and in particular, that space of the abdomen has a little bit of length to it, so you're not hunched over in any way, okay? So from here, just start to rest the palms down onto the thighs. And then just start to close the eyes and draw the attention inward. And from here, just start to notice how you're finding the body in this particular moment. The overall sensation of the breath. And just over the next minute or so, becoming a little bit more aware of where and how you're breathing in space. And most importantly, as you become a little bit more aware of how and where you are breathing, coming to that place of awareness without any sense of judgment. Good, and just take a couple more cycles of inhale and exhale. And at the bottom of the next exhalation, just very gently start to open the eyes and draw your attention back into the space of which you find yourself. Very good. So that's a little bit of just placing our attention on the breath, which brings us to this place of breathing inquiry.
So as you were observing your breath, you might want to ask questions such as, how long was the inhale, that is the breath in? Or how long was your exhale, or the breath out? Were there pauses? Was the breath regular? How long were the inhales and exhales, and how long were the pauses, perhaps, if there were any? And we had a question last workshop, and it came towards the end of it, and many participants have dropped off by then, and we thought it would be good to bring it back. And that was, why do we breathe through our nose? Or is it better to breathe through nose versus breathing through our mouth? And whereas there are certain breath techniques that sometimes will direct breath through the mouth, most of the time we do want to be breathing through our nose. It has a lot of benefits. So as we breathe through our nose, the breath is controlled. There's two holes, they're smaller, so the amount of air comes in slow enough to get humidified, moisturized through that process as it moves through the cavities of the nasal cavities of the skull. And those pathways also have the cilia, which are little hair-like structures that also help to filter some of the unwanted particles that might be coming in. Those particles line the rest of the system as well, all the way through our lungs. But more of them we have, so it's a longer pathway through our nose, more the opportunity to get the particles that don't belong into our lungs out. And the other important thing that happens when we breathe through our nose, we actually stimulate nitric oxide production. There are quite a few centers along the nasal cavities, especially, that help and aid with the production of nitric oxide. And that particular chemical helps to dilate vessels. So when we breathe slowly and thoughtfully, mindfully through our nose, the vessels dilate, and then there is more availability of oxygen to be delivered and available to other tissues in their body. Nitric oxide is also known for anti-inflammatory properties. So just some thoughts about as you're breathing and how you're breathing, and why that might be good to breathe through your nose. There's so much so studies that show individuals who breathe through their nose versus through their mouth, and how the oxidative stress, which is kind of a stress that happens to our body naturally through just being aging, being exposed to light or other environmental factors, or even through exercise, which is good for us, but it's still an oxidative stress. So these differences between when we breathe through our nose and through our mouth have been shown in the studies, that those who breathe through their mouth have more oxidative stress on their body. So just some thoughts on breathing through your nose and why it's important. All right, and on this slide, we have a variety of qualities of breath. You might be, being able to label your breath with, and we are going for these positive qualities of the smooth, steady, effortless, endless, just kind of feeling of expansive space, if you will. And the English translations on the right and the Sanskrit's on the left, and Sam is the expert in Sanskrit. So Sam, why don't you tell us what is Sanskrit?
So with the Sanskrit that's on the left, we mostly bring attention to the use and utilization of the Sanskrit terminology for the pranayama, also a Sanskrit word, just to recognize the tradition in which we're practicing in. So obviously there are connotations toward the larger Hindu sect of where the language comes from, which ultimately derives from the Vedic tradition, which is where yoga really comes from. Now, it's not as if we're going to be learning Sanskrit in this context, but it's mostly just to bring a little bit of attention and honoring that tradition that we're practicing in. But as Sylvie really brought attention to, some of the qualities that we're trying to enunciate with the breath are what we have here presented. So note that what we went over a little bit last time was also this differentiation between parasympathetic and sympathetic qualities of breath. So a lot of the time with a lot of the activities that we tend to do, it tends to move us more into a sympathetic state. And with the breath, and in particular with pranayama, which is a type of breath that pertains to the yoga tradition, we're trying to move ourselves into this more parasympathetic state. So maybe you want to address that just very briefly, Sylvie, but it really highlights this idea of a smooth, steady, comfortable, subtle, spacious breath that we're going for when we are trying to be a little bit more specific with our breathing.
I am happy to do a quick overview of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So quick examples that come to my mind and that are always given in physiology related lectures are when we're in a sympathetic state, it's kind of that flight or fight, right? We're ready to run or we're ready to attack. So think of a cat in the dark, the pupils are dilated, hair is up, breath is faster. Muscles are activated, blood flow is going to those muscles so the body can react, and the GI system is mostly shut down. Whereas the parasympathetic state is more like you're after Thanksgiving dinner, right? Everything is digesting, lots of blood is going to the GI. There is a lot of calming kind of effect. So those are really lay examples. There are so many more that I could give, but just to give the difference between the two states. And more we're in a sympathetic state, which is more on the alert, more wear and tear we put on our body. So it is our goal to be able to, I'm probably not a goal, but it is good for us to know how to bring our body back to a parasympathetic state, one of which we can do through, for example, deep belly breathing, as we kind of massage that vagal nerve, which is like the main nerve for the parasympathetic response of our body. Sam, is there anything else you'd like me to add?
That's very, very good. And I will make just say as a side note, not all pranayama techniques are specifically utilizing this movement toward a parasympathetic state. There are times where we are exercising that other, let's say, branch of the autonomic nervous system. So that's just a side note. But at the end of the day, for the most part, as a generalization, we're trying to move into these spaces of smooth, steady, comfortable, and a subtle breath when we're practicing pranayama or breath work. So from here, we're going to go into a short breathing exercise, and I'm going to put myself on a spotlight for a moment. So hopefully everybody can see me in a really tiny little box. So again, just for a reference, Sylvie is in a seated position on a chair and I'm seated on the floor. So depending on where you are, maybe look toward either of us for an idea about how we're setting up our bodies. But this idea of a three-part breath is foundational for a lot of pranayama techniques. So hopefully everybody can see my spine a little bit, but ultimately we want to start our breath from this place of the abdomen or the belly, the abdominal cavity, where my hands are right now. And that's the first place that we want to start breathing into. So you can just start to move back into that breath if it's appropriate for you. Maybe keeping the jaw nice and soft, lips touching, if it's appropriate to breathe through the nostrils. And just slowly start to breathe into the palms. And really notice what that feels like as you breathe into the palms. So there's an expansion that takes place on the inhale. And then as you exhale, the belly starts to relax again and the palm starts to move back toward neutral. So just notice what that feels like. Inhale, expanding the palms. Exhale, allowing the belly to move back toward neutral. So there's this idea that the inhale is slightly more active, and the exhalation is going to be slightly more passive, as another generalization. So from that place of breathing into the belly, which is where we want the breath to be predominantly oriented, start to slide the hands up into that place around the rib cage. So a couple of options. You can take the hands either to the side of the ribs, if that's okay. Otherwise, you can just place the palms more towards sort of that middle area at the bottom edge of the sternum. It's that sort of like that bony area right in the middle of the chest. It's somewhat flat for most of us, but this is going to be the best or most appropriate way to feel the rib cage or that middle part of the breath expanding. So from the belly, start to move the breath up into the sides of the ribs. And you'll notice again that the palms start to widen and expand away from the spine. And as you exhale, there's that movement back towards the spine. And just play with that for a few moments. There's an inhale, the rib cage expands, breathing through the nostrils. And as you exhale, the rib cage come back toward neutral. And then just doing that a couple of times, inhaling, expanding. Exhale to return. And notice what that feels like in comparison and relationship to the belly. Good. Just a couple more times like that. And then from here, we're going to slide the palms up a little bit higher. So I'm going to take my palms and I'm going to place the tops of my fingertips right around where my collarbones are, sort of right at the top of the chest before I start to move up into my neck. And I'm just going to leave my palms more on the top of my chest. And then I'm going to start to slowly direct my breath up into the chest. And so the same kind of thing. Start to notice the chest expanding as you inhale. And as you exhale, just notice the chest moving back toward neutral again. That sense of, on the inhalation, actively expanding, seeking out space in the chest. And as you exhale, there's that sense of a passive return toward neutral. If it's helpful, you can always close the eyes as you breathe. And just noticing how that feels in your body at this moment in time. Just a couple more cycles like that. Maybe you can even start to feel the breath moving up into the back of the neck, maybe even into that space right between the shoulder blades. Good. One more full cycle. And then very gently opening the eyes, gazing out in front. If you do have the eyes closed, I'm going to take one palm back to my belly. And I'm going to keep one palm on my chest. And now I'm going to incorporate all three of those movements. So as I inhale, I'm going to breathe into my palm on my belly, then up into the sides of my rib cage, and then up into my palm that's on my chest. So it might be a slightly longer breath for some of us. And then as I exhale, I'm going to reverse that. So I exhale in my chest, side ribs, and then my belly relaxes again. And I'm just going to do that a couple of times on your own count and rhythm. Inhaling belly, rib cage, up into the chest. Exhale, chest, rib cage, and to the belly. Good. And then just continuing that process on your own for a few counts. Breathing through the nostrils, keeping the jaw soft, tongue soft in the palate. Just bringing attention to that sense of expansion, extension, that cultivating of space on the inhale. And as you exhale, that sense of moving back into that space that you've created on the inhalation. There's that sense of seeking out space, active, returning into space, passive as you exhale. Good. Do one more full cycle on your own. And at the bottom of that next exhalation, just very gently take the palms back to the thighs and return back to a more neutral breath that's comfortable. Good. So that's an example of what we might refer to as a three-part breath, where we're exercising that relationship between the abdominal cavity and then up into the thoracic cavity. And again, as Sylvie mentioned, there's that relationship directly to these two aspects of the body that move us and relate to that parasympathetic and sympathetic domain of breathing and how we're mediating those two spaces.
Sam, can I add one thing? I loved how
Absolutely.
you directed us towards the breath between our shoulder blades.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when we breathe, especially when we're practicing a new technique, there is so much attention to the front of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to just offer that we think of the body as like a 360 cylinder. So as Sam was guiding the breath between the shoulder blades, you might also want to think about breath, not just to the belly, but maybe puffing out at the area around your kidneys, and not just the bottom of the ribs, but also ribs as a whole in the back as well. That's all.
And maybe to continue that train of thought, Sylvie, it's also to say that the positioning of the lungs are more toward the back of the body. And so I think that really connects that idea of not only focusing on the front, what's out in front, but also what's behind. And this is an interesting concept because it starts to relate to what we can virtually see and what we cannot see. And so it's a really nice exercise, as Sylvia was mentioning, to really be a little bit more attentive to how's the breath affecting the back of my body. And for me especially, that's a really hard skill, and it takes a long time sometimes to really move into that space. But thank you for mentioning that, Sylvie.
You're welcome.
Okay, so everybody's favorite topic. A little bit of some of the philosophical applications of the practice of pranayama and what it's related to. So one of the things that we're attempting to do in pranayama is access this more sattvic state. So this relates to the three qualities that are integral to the composition of all matter, everything that's of material existence. So this is pertaining a little bit more toward the metaphysical composition of the Vedic tradition, and then in particular, yoga as a philosophical system. So there are three qualities to matter, or in the philosophical tradition that we are adhering to, this idea of prakriti. And they all include tamas, which is the state of inactivity, lethargy for lack of a better term. Then we have this idea of rajas, which is a state of energy, this notion of movement, which is sometimes related to the idea of fire. We're burning up a lot of energy. And we might look at these two qualities, tamas and rajas, from this idea of one that's expanding always outward and one that's always expanding inward. So you see the word entropy that's related to this idea of tamas, which we're in a sense, when we become too tamasic, we start to really collapse in on ourselves. Yeah, where energy becomes too stagnant. And then the opposite of that is this idea of rajas, which is we're burning far too brightly to where our energy is dispersing everywhere outside of the body. We're giving up a lot of that energy. And so when we're doing pranayama, our breathing practice, so for example, that 3-part breath, the ultimate goal is to cultivate the sattvic energy, which is this idea of balance between this movement outward, too much energy and the energy expanding away, and this idea of energy collapsing in on itself. So we're trying to find the space between those two, let's say, movements, outward and inward. And this is, again, this idea of what is the breath communicating to us energetically? Is my energy too much to where I'm losing energy because it's leaving me? Or am I becoming too lethargic where my energy is collapsing in on itself? I'm always trying to mitigate those two spaces through this idea of a sattvic quality. So from here, we want to maybe continue that train of thought, and I want to introduce this idea of the 5 Vayus. So there's this idea of prana, which is located predominantly from the heart to the throat up into the head, this kind of area, which governs things like respiration, cardiovascular functioning, circulation, thought, all of these types of things. Then we have this idea of apāna, which is more the lower portion of the body. So from the feet up into the navel. So we can think of prana and apāna as two oriented spaces from the lower portion to the upper portion. And then we have the entirety of the body, which is referred to as vayana, which governs circulation. So, you know, we think of the lymphatic system or blood flow, things like that. And then we have two slightly more smaller categories, which is udana, which is throat to the top of the head, this sort of area around the cervical spine up into the skull. And then we have samana, which is from the navel to the heart. So for the purposes of pranayama and our breathing activities, we're concerned with two predominant areas. And obviously, those are the apāna and the prana. The prana is this idea, some of you may have heard the word already, which is predominantly oriented toward this idea of the life force. And it's sometimes referred to and associated to this more rajasic quality or force. And so the idea for us when we're coming into a breathing practice is, can we contain and harness prana in the body so that it's not slowing down and it's not speeding up too much to the point where it's dispersing all over the place and we're not able to really enhance that force that's embedded in all of us. So again, this prana concept can be activated, as you may have heard me say when we were going through the 3-part breath, during inhalation, where it's more the active principle. We're seeking out space literally through the inhalation. We're doing something. Whereas on the exhalation, we're moving more into that apānic quality, which is going to be a slightly more tamasic quality, where energy is now moving a little bit more inward. I like to think of it as more as a period of assimilation, where the inhale is really cultivating that energy, doing. The exhalation is allowing me to really cultivate, harness, and preserve that energy that I've just cultivated. And we might think about it through these two qualities of prana, energy, and this more apānic idea, which is predominantly associated with the lower portion of the body. So these might be really new concepts for a lot of people, but I just wanted to introduce them because it does relate to this idea of pranayama that we are practicing, okay? If there's any questions about that, please leave any comments in the chat and we can come back to these ideas as sort of more symbolic connotations to the physical application of breathing. So now we're going to come into another practice. This is a breathing workshop. So from this idea of where we're breathing through the three parts of the breath, now we're going to incorporate a little bit of movement to facilitate a deepening of the breath. Now, there's going to be two different examples of something that you can do, and we're going to do both of them briefly before we come into a final breathing practice, which is going to incorporate sound. But first, I'm seated in my cross-legged seat. I think Sylvie's still in the chair. So again, wherever's most comfortable for you. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the arms out by the sides of the body. So my fingertips are going to be touching the ground. If you're in a chair, they probably will not be touching the ground. And the only thing that we're going to do is lift the arms up and lift the arms down. And we're going to couple that movement with the inhale and the exhale. So I'm going to take myself off the share screen so you can see my arms a little bit more clearly here. So hopefully everybody can still see me well enough right now. If you want to give me a thumbs up, that would be great. Okay. So from here, again, incorporating that same three-part breath, but with the arms. So this is going to be the first iteration. Exhale everything out where you are. Allow the body to be upright, but nice and soft. And then as you inhale, we're going to start to slowly lift the arms all the way out and then all the way up. If it's okay with your body, try to straighten the arms, reach up. And then we're going to exhale and slowly take the arms all the way back down. That's all we're going to do. Inhale, slow and control, out and up. So we're trying to synchronize the inhale with the arm movement and the exhale, slowly taking the arms all the way back down. Good, we'll just do that a couple of times. Inhale through the nostrils if it's okay. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Maybe even find yourself pausing at the top of the inhale and the bottom of the exhale, just moving on your own breath. Good. Do one more full cycle like that. And then when you arrive at the bottom of the next exhale, just pause where you are. So that might be something that you continue to do, but here's another variation of how we can utilize arm movements to really open up the space around the rib cage, the thoracic cavity in and around the chest to expand how we're able to access room and deepen the breath in the body. So I'm going to take the hands to the center of the heart. If you have anything going on with the elbows or the shoulders, just come back to that first variation. So just following along first, and then we can do it on our own. So I'm going to inhale. I reach the arms directly up towards the ceiling. Again, spine's nice and long. Then I'm going to exhale. I'm going to extend my arms all the way out to the sides. Palms are facing down, shoulders nice and soft. Then I'm going to inhale. I'm turning my palms open to face the ceiling. Good. Then I'm going to exhale. I'm going to bend my elbows and draw my elbows towards the sideways. My palms are still open. Then I inhale, I'm going to extend away from the spine. I turn my palms back down to face the floor. And then I exhale my palms back towards center. So that's the variation. We'll do that a couple of times together. Inhale, the arms lift. Exhale, extend out, palms facing down, shoulders nice and soft. Inhale, opening the palms. Exhale, drawing the elbows towards the side waists. Inhale, extending the arms out, palms facing down. Exhale, palms back to center. We'll do that one more time together. Inhale, extend. Exhale, widen. Inhale, open the palms. Exhale, bend the elbows. Inhale, extend the palms away from center. And exhale, draw the palms back towards center. Good. Just take a long inhale where you are. And a long exhale where you are, and take the palms back towards the thighs. Very good. Hopefully everybody is feeling a little bit more, let's say, energetic. And then the last practice that we're going to do is going to incorporate a little bit of sound. So one thing that we can do when we're trying to activate the breath a little bit is use vibration, which breath essentially is a form of vibration, to open up the respiratory system. Okay, so we're going to utilize these two words coupled with the inhale and the exhale. Shrim and prum. So we're going to use them, one with the inhale and then one with the exhale. So we're not going to do any of the arm movements, and we're just going to take the palms back towards the thighs. And then everybody I know is muted, so you can even practice a couple of times just saying the word out loud. Srum, and there's a drawn out vibration, and then another drawn out vibration. And it doesn't matter what you sound like because everybody's muted and nobody can hear each other. But what we're going to do, and I'll demonstrate it a couple of times, is as you inhale, there's the shrim connotation. Oh, sorry, when we inhale, there's going to be the hum, and when we exhale, there's going to be the more passive srum. Okay, so I'm going to do it a couple times, and then you can join in with me. Again, we're just playing with this idea now of the more solar energy, which is associated to this hrim type quality, and the lunar energy, which is associated with the shrim type quality, which is attenuated through this idea of sound and vibration. Okay, hrim, inhale, shrim, exhale. I'm going to do it a couple times, and then you can join in with me. So first thing is I take an inhale, and then I just take a long, even exhale. Pause. You can see my chest may be coming back to a neutral as I'm breathing through my nostrils. And you can see it's more of a hum. Whenever you feel most comfortable, you can just start to join in. So I inhale and I exhale. And for some of us, getting into this practice, you might do the sound with the, and then you inhale. Body comes back toward neutral, and then you allow the rest of the exhale to take place. I'll do it a couple more times. Very good. So it's another idea about where we can take the work of pranayama to incorporate mantra or sound to follow with that breath. And maybe you notice when you do this, when you find yourself in this place of making noise, of creating sound, the attention hones in on the sound. And sometimes this can be a great tool for really reorienting the focus. You can also tell with this particular breath work that the sound is a little bit more upward and uplifting, and the is a little bit more, it's a little bit more inward. The qualities and the vibration are slightly different in connotation to that more lunar, the and the being somewhat more solar, okay? And that again connects us to this idea of the three gunas, that movement toward a sattvic quality in relationship toward that rajasic quality, which in this case we might associate with that sound, and the tamasic quality, which we might associate a little bit with that shrum sound. So it's not to say that there's any negative or positive connotations to either of those sounds. What it is to say is that we're trying to cultivate a balance between these two energetic movements to cultivate a more sattvic energetic balance.